Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The Sparkfile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, your one-stop buried treasure for creative inspiration.
I'm Laura Camian.
And I'm Susan Blackwell. If you're an OG listener, welcome back, Sparkler. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. But you may be asking yourself, what exactly is a Spark File? Where do I get one? What do I file in it? These are such good questions, and we do have answers.
A Spark File is a place where you consistently collect all your inspirations and fascinations.
Here's the deal. We are makers who make all kinds of things.
If you're like us and you're making stuff all the time, or if you want to be making stuff all the time, you know the wellspring of inspiration can sometimes run a little dry.
That's right. So we're on the lookout for fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark our creativity and pique our curiosity. Things that inspire us to get up off of our asses and make things like this podcast.
Or a habit of remembering those who came before you.
Or a creative celebration of history's most fascinating women.
No, I like it. Every episode, we're going to reach into the Spark File and exchange some sparks. And from time to time, we're going to talk to some folks who spark us as well.
And if you're not careful, you might just meet your new favorite lady. So without further ado, let's open up
the Spark File. Susan!
Hi, Cams.
Hi, it's one of my favorite days.
This is my favorite day. It's recording day. Cams, I came across this quote by Mary Oliver that I had never...
A new one? A freshie?
New to me. Not new to the world, but new to me. And it goes like this. Every day I see or hear something that more or less kills me with delight, that leaves me like a needle in the haystack of light.
Oh.
And I was like, she's talking about sparks.
Oh my God. That's incredible. I need that. Yeah. I actually need that quote.
This, just the first part. Every day I see or hear something that more or less kills me with delight.
Amazing.
I love it.
And the truth.
Thanks, Mary Oliver. Cams.
Yeah, baby Blackwell.
What's going on with you? Anything to say or know? Or
I'm
share?
just excited to share things that I now know that I didn't know before, things I looked into, things I discovered. It excites me.
That's exciting.
It killed me with delight. And I want to share that.
We did not discuss who's going first.
We did not. That's yet another surprise. What are you thinking? I'm trying to read your face right now, and I can't.
Do you want me to go first?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
You think we would have sorted these things out a bit later?
We really like you to be part of the process.
I'm going to jump in.
You go.
I'm going to jump in.
Great. What you got?
Okay.
As you like to say.
What you got? My spark sources include the Artgasm podcast with Allison Moon and the work of Jason Porath, which we are going to dig into in a moment. This spark first came to me via an Instagram post from an opera singer named Jamie Barton, whose Instagram handle is @jbartonmezzo. Her Insta profile reads, proudly queer opera singer into sci-fi, drag queens, bluegrass, social justice, equality, and cats.
Yes.
And then there's the cat with the heart eyes emoji.
Yes.
I don't know, Jamie. I first became aware of Jamie when I watched a documentary. This is a whole spark unto itself. I watched a documentary of the Metropolitan Opera's annual singing competition, which is entitled The Audition. Jamie was one of the competitors the year that documentary was filmed, which I believe was 2007. But since then, Jamie has become this fancy pants opera star, performing big roles at big opera houses. I'm also a fan of Jamie because, like me, Jamie buys thrift store paintings and then paints things into them like cats. Yes, Jamie.
Yes,
but
Jamie.
That's not the spark. Here's a spark. Recently, Jamie posted this on Instagram. Most operatic stories honestly make me want to barf. Wavy emoji. Hi, La Boheme. So this hashtag Valentine's Day, I'd like to celebrate a bit of operatic history in the real life story of Julie Daumonier, also known by her stage name, Mademoiselle de Maupont. I don't know.
Fabulous name. I don't know if you're pronouncing it right. It doesn't matter. That is fabulous.
I put my money on I'm not pronouncing it right, but okay. Mademoiselle de Maupont lived between 1673 and 1707 and was a true tour de force. Not only was she an opera singer at the Paris Opera, but she was also a bisexual, cross-dressing swordswoman who upended societal expectations at every turn. Insert crossed sabers emoji. The post goes on to say some other stuff. Jamie Barton says this, in related news, if anyone wants to write an opera on the life of Julie Daumonier, I really want to put this nonstop adventure on stage. And if you want to learn more about her, I'm partial to her entry on @rejected_princesses. #curiosity, #meet opera. I was like, I really want to learn. I want to learn more about Mademoiselle de Maupont. And I really wanted to know more about Jamie's source for this info, Rejected Princesses.
Hello.
So, I let my little fingies do the walking and I clicked through to @Rejected Princesses and rejectedprincesses.com Cambion. A whole treasure trove of sparkly sparkles opened up before my eyes. Welcome to the mighty spark source that is Rejected Princesses. Are you familiar with any of this?
I have vaguely heard a little, but I'm not sure it's what I think it is. So I can't wait to hear more.
Okay, great. Take the ride. Rejected Princesses is many things. It's a website. It's 2 books. It's social media accounts. I know I'm super late to this party, but it is a delightful treasure trove to discover at any time. Rejected Princesses is the brainchild of a dude named Jason Porath. Jason was working at DreamWorks Animation, not as an artist, but more of like a technical animator. He tells the story in the introduction to his first book titled Rejected Princesses about how he and his coworkers were at lunch and they were having a conversation along the lines of, who is the least likely woman to ever get the animated princess treatment? And over that lunch hour, they were one-upping each other with increasingly inappropriate suggestions. The most inappropriate, Nabokov's Lolita. Sure. But throughout, Jason kept suggesting obscure warrior women he'd learned about from Wikipedia binges, like the Angolan freedom fighter Nzingi Mabande. And none of his co-work, I know you're like, have not heard of Nzingi Mabande.
I need this in my life.
None of his co-workers had ever heard of these women, and he thought that should change.
Yes.
He strikes me as the kind of person who is sort of an autodidact, and he'll take, like if something catches his interest, he'll just take a super deep dive on it. So he was referencing all of these historical women, and he was like, oh, really? Oh, I thought that was more like a household name. So this is where we start.
Wow. That tells us a lot.
In the intro to Rejected Princesses, he goes on to say, there's a list of stories in your head. You know the ones. It's the list schools give to girls, Amelia Earhart, Marie Curie, Rosa Parks, and so on. It's safe, it's censored, it's short. It's the list of amazing women in history. But what of the untold stories, the uncompromised ones, the uncomfortable ones, the rejected ones?
Yes.
That's where this book comes in.
Oh, hell yes.
Think back to history class. You learned about male figures running the gamut from Abe Lincoln to Genghis Khan. And on the female side, the aforementioned short list. And that list was not a foregone conclusion. It's not like history lacks for strong-minded women. But at some point, our society collectively decided that people like Elizabeth I and Cleopatra VII are fine, but rebels, hellions, and warlords, not so much. And when someone like Harriet Tubman does sneak onto the list, the unpalatable parts of her story, the bits that are not suitable for children, get left off.
Oh,
so
for
that's
sure.
where he's coming from. This sort of like, we hear so much about these male, multidimensional, sometimes, oftentimes like very imperfect, but they still are held up as these historical figures. And there are female counterparts that
hell
just get left off the list.
That's
because they're
for
not
sure.
virtuous, or they're not, or there's like or they what we call shave the carrot, where they like, yeah, we'll include Harriet Tubman, but not the part about her,
Yeah, those inconvenient truths that, because we have a habit of wanting to make heroes out of people. That's very black and white, hero or villain.
Yeah.
And in particular with women, we have a hard time with anyone that falls somewhere in between.
Yes. This is why I find Jason's work so brilliant. Some of the women's lives that Jason covers in his work are what Cams and I would call #dark sparks. These women have been through it, or they put other people through it. But to his point, he felt that just because they were complex or not purely virtuous, that doesn't mean they weren't historically significant. Jason thought that these stories about these amazing complex women were so sparkish, he had to see them illustrated. So he did some illustrations in that animated princess style. Despite having little to no artistic background, he was more of a technical animator who did what they call physics programming. The side spark, I love it when people learn a skill in order to do what they need to do to be self-expressed. You showed me the graphic novel of an artist, Mira Jacob, who was not she was an author. She taught herself to draw.
She taught herself to draw in order to do a graphic novel that she saw in her head. It's called Good Talk, and we may do a spark about it soon. But she did exactly that. It's like, well, I guess I'm going to need to roll up my sleeves and learn how to draw.
That's what Jason Porath did too.
Fantastic.
And I love that.
So good.
As soon as he put these pieces online, they went viral and it became his full-time job. And this may be when you maybe were exposed to Jason's work.
When did he start to get these stories out? Do you know?
I can't.
Or when did that book come out?
I'd have to look.
Okay.
Yeah.
No worries.
I don't remember.
We'll figure it out.
So for each illustration, there is an accompanying story about the woman he's covering. And he's also a self-taught scholar. He'll read everything there is to know about a woman, and he's distilling, by his account, he's distilling 500 pages of research and biography into a 2 to 3 page story.
Incredible.
Incredible. And then we, the reader, get to just enjoy this really funny, well-prepared sort of smorgasbord tasting menu of fantastically interesting historical women. And if you want to learn more, you can just hit up his citations and dig deeper. So I really appreciate it. It's like, they're really fun. Nathan and I sometimes read aloud to each other in the evenings instead of watching television.
Love that.
And they're so, it's like 2 to 3 pages. They're kind of bite size, and you learn about these people that you have in most cases had minimal to no exposure to before.
That's right.
And then, so you get to read one, you discuss it, you look at the pictures, and then you can decide if it's time to brush our teeth and go to bed, or you can decide if you want to read another story. It's like being a kid again, kind of. Yeah.
Oh, how cool.
So here he is, the self-taught artist and scholar who caught a great spark, fanned the flames, and then spent the next 5 years making some really cool shit. Jason describes himself as an unlikely candidate to make an illustrated blog about feminist, historical, multicultural, butt-kicking ladies. Like I said, not a historian, not a trained artist.
Not a woman.
Not a woman. He's the straight, white, cis dude from Kentucky. But he said on his website, I'm going to do it anyway. Really, I just think this stuff is neat. I try hard to get things right and to make it worth your while. I'm learning as I go. Mostly, I just try not to screw up as much this week as last week.
I actually want to say, like, this is one of the things that keeps coming up in my mind as you're telling this story, and I commend him for saying that. I think we often ask the question, who gets to tell a story?
Yeah.
And in this day and age, Jason might not be allowed to tell these stories because he's not, quote unquote, qualified as a woman. And yet his heart is so in it. And I just want to say, I'm so fucking glad he did.
It is. It's a tricky,
Despite that-
and I think he's taken
Yeah.
some heat for it too.
I'm sure.
And when he, especially like if he doesn't, like I'm using quotey signs, like do it perfectly. Like if he doesn't absolutely recognize all the source material and other like if he caught a spark from another living, especially like a woman artist, and he's not really careful to honor that person and cite them. I think he's caught some heat for it, but he really does seem, in my research, I don't know this guy, I don't know his life, but he's got a very strong purpose behind it, a very strong why, which we'll get to in a little bit. And I think he really does just try to do it as well as he can and just keep getting progressively better.
Amen to that. And I think that no matter who did it, if it was a woman, of any background, I think they would still get heat. It's very difficult, like the range of stories that he's telling in there to, cover everything. So I think no matter who did it, they might get some heat for like the details. But I just think like it's one of the more perplexing and unsolved issues of the day. I think that's very timely. That's why I kind of asked, like, when did the book come out? Because there are moments in history where a man writing about women was a no-brainer. Everything was written by men, regardless of the topic. But
it's more complicated now.
It's more complicated now, but I'm just really glad that someone is doing it, because the stories need to get told, and it's someone who has obviously good intentions behind all of it. That's what matters, I think.
From what I can tell, the intentions are good. And the other thing I want to say is he's also striving to cover people, stories, legends, myths, all sorts of things from around the globe, because he's really interested in that diversity. But that means he's talking a lot about lived experience that is not his own.
Well, and when you have the microphone, you get to decide where you spend your time and what you shine a light on. So would we prefer that, if Jason's got the microphone, that he only shine a light on what his life experience has been, or that he take the time to shine a light on so many others so that people like us or others who have podcasts or want to write novels or screenplays or books can take these 2 to 3 page stories that he has and go deeper and tell a greater story.
It's an interesting, complex question, but
it is.
I'm psyched that he did the work.
Hell yeah.
I thought it would be fun to sample some of the stories from Jason's books and his site, rejectedprincesses.com. When I read, I will be reading highlights from his words just to give you a taste of his work. Typically, I like to put things in my own words, but his style is so zippy, and it's what I want to highlight today.
Yes.
So you're hearing a sampling of his words. If you like it, I really encourage you to sample his fine, sparkish work.
Love it.
So let's start with my gateway drug, courtesy of Jamie Barton. And pardon my French pronunciation, Julie Dabonnier, I hope, lived from 1670 to 1707. Jason Porath writes, at the top of the list of history's greatest rascals is undoubtedly l'homme en pain, Julie Dabonnier, sword slinger, opera singer, and larger-than-life bisexual celebrity of 17th century France.
Woo!
Her life was a whirlwind of duels, seduction, grave robbing, and convent burning so intense that she had to be pardoned by the King of France twice. La Maupin, her married/professional name, had a real piece of work for a dad. As the man in charge of training Louis XIV's pages, his main ideas for daddy-daughter bonding time was to teach her how to use deadly weapons. La Maupin earned her living through singing and dueling demonstrations, usually dressed as a man, a fashion she'd keep with for the rest of her life. She was already so skilled with the sword at this point in her life that audiences sometimes would not believe she was actually a woman. In fact, when one drunken onlooker proclaimed loudly that she was actually a man, she tore off her shirt, providing him ample evidence to the contrary. The heckler had no comeback.
Ooh.
So I'm talking about, it's like
Yes.
you just hit the ground running. It's just fun and swashbuckling. So if La Maupin had one overriding flaw, it was an allergy to boredom. At one point, she pronounced herself tired of men in general and seduced a local merchant's daughter. The merchant, desperate to separate the two, sent his daughter to a convent, but our heroine found a loophole. La Maupin joined the convent herself and started hooking up with her intended in the house of God.
Hello.
Shortly into their convent stay, an elderly nun died from unrelated causes, it would seem, and La Maupin reacted the same way anyone might, by disinterring the body, putting it in her lover's room, and setting the whole convent on fire. You know, same old story. That's like a plot of a movie or an opera. It's amazing.
Oh my God.
The two ran off in the confusion and enjoyed a long elopement. After 3 months, La Maupin got bored, dumped her back at her parents' house, and ran off into the night.
Ooh, ouch.
For this bout of shenaniganery, it's a great word, La Maupin was sentenced to death. In response, she convinced Louis XIV to revoke her sentence. The king did so, and she took advantage of her new lease on life by running off to Paris and joining the opera.
What'd she have on Louis? I wonder what. I'm so sparked by
they
that
partied
relationship.
Together. They seem like they had. She seems like a lot of fun.
What's the scoop?
All of this happened before she was 20.
Oh my gosh.
What Jason says makes you feel like an underachiever. Her behavior amped up even more when she became an opera singer, basically the rock stars of the day. In true theater major fashion, she alternately fucked and fought her way through her stage contemporaries, and audiences loved her for it. Stories of her time in Paris. Another opera singer named Dumesnil started talking shit about a number of women, including La Maupin. She responded by ambushing him, pushing a sword in his face, and demanding a duel. When he refused on the grounds he was a wimp, she beat him with a cane, stealing his snuff box and watch. The next day, she caught him complaining that he had been assaulted by a gang of thieves. She called him a liar and coward, threw his watch and snuff box at him, and declared that she alone had architected his ass beating. Another story from her time in Paris. She attended a royal ball thrown either by Louis XIV or his brother, dressed as a man. She spent most of the evening courting a young woman, which earned the ire of 3 of the woman's suitors. When La Maupin pushed things too far and kissed the young lady in full view of everyone, the 3 challenged her to a duel. She fought all of them, outside of the royal palace, mind you, and won. According to some accounts, she actually killed them. This entertained Louis XIV so much that he pardoned her from any punishment.
Oh
There
my
you go.
gosh.
I think she was a good fucking time.
Wow.
Yeah. She died in Paris of unknown causes. She was, at best anyone could tell, 37.
Stop.
That's a lot of living.
That's a lot of living. Someone obviously needs to write. Give us the full story of her.
I want to show you. This is the illustration. Now, sometimes Jason Porath will do it's almost like an extended, it's not a full graphic novel, but it will look like a mini graphic novel telling the story. Instead of it being text, like sort of prose, he'll tell the story in graphic novel style.
Cool.
But this is his, so this is the princess version of Julie d'Aubigné. Mademoiselle.
Wow. That's fabulous.
Do you want to tell the people what you see there, Cams?
I see a dress as a man, swashbuckler. I mean, really, she's
Disney princess style.
Disney princess style. We got the big eyes. But yeah, looks like she's running away from the fire
of the convent.
With her rather childlike lover in hand. It's amazing.
And
it's amazing.
He also does a really cool job. He puts artist notes at the bottom of his entries so he can explain why he selected what the person is wearing, and what even little details in the background to draw your eye to what pieces of the story that's reflecting. And it could be things that you've already read, or it could be fresh information
coming up.
So
it's very detailed.
There's a lot of thought and a lot of research that goes into it. Jason Porath, people.
Wow.
Jason is a spark generator. And I agree with Jamie Barton. This is a great spark of inspiration and a great idea about what one might possibly make with a spark with this opera. I mean, I'd watch that nutty fucking opera.
It's sparks on top of sparks. As we say, sparks beget sparks. So Jason is living his creative life and inspiring others to get creative with these stories, whether that turns into operas or screenplays or paintings, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, he really is just handing out the sparks.
And you've got Jamie Barton, mezzo extraordinaire, telling someone, write it. Somebody get on it. Remember Philip Polatsky, who wrote us about the opera he conceived after being sparked by the Spark File? Philip, if you're listening, get to work.
We need you.
You want one more?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
I'll see. I'm sorry about the names. A lot of these names are unfamiliar to my tongue. So,
and probably unfamiliar to others.
I practiced,
as well.
but I don't know that practice will translate. Maria Oktyabrskaya, the tank driving widow. Born in 1905, died in 1944. These are Jason's words. On a list of the toughest women who ever lived, near the top will be Sergeant Maria Oktyabrskaya and her tank fighting girlfriend. During World War II, her army officer husband, Ilya, was killed in action. In response, Maria sold literally all of their belongings in order to buy a tank. Then she wrote Stalin the following letter. My husband was killed in action defending the motherland. I want revenge on the fascist dogs for his death and for the death of Soviet people tortured by the fascist barbarians. For this purpose, I've deposited all my personal savings, 50,000 rubles, to the National Bank in order to build a tank. I kindly ask to name the tank Fighting Girlfriend and to send me to the front line as a driver of said tank. Stalin wrote back pretty quickly and said, yes.
Sure.
And
join us.
Can you...
Unfucking believable. And how have we not heard this story before?
We're hearing it now, baby.
Unbelievable. I can't get over it.
I know.
Sorry.
So, no, I love it. So initially the army was skeptical of her ability to handle a tank. However, she quickly proved in training that she could drive, shoot, and throw grenades with the best of them, skills she'd picked up from her late husband, with whom she'd presumably had some interesting dates. On her first outing in the tank, she outmaneuvered this is fucking bananas.
This is incredible.
On her first outing in the tank, she outmaneuvered the German soldiers, killing around 30 of them and taking out an anti-tank gun. When they shelled her, immobilizing Fighting Girlfriend, she got out in the middle of a firefight and repaired the damn thing. Then she got back in and proceeded to kill more Germans. Can you even imagine?
Can't even. It's incredible.
Unbelievable. In the end, she was taken out by a mortar round, which she got out of the tank in the middle of yet another firefight to fix Fighting Girlfriend. She was awarded the highest honor in the Soviet military and is buried in one of the nation's most sacred cemeteries. And here is Jason Porath's illustration. Here's Maria and Maria's tank Fighting Girlfriend.
Wow.
Yeah. So Maria's sort of like draped across
fiery redhead.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Big eyes. Like, yeah, she's draped across the
and
front
the tank
of her. And
looks
the
like it's in
tank
Cars.
Is like
it's in Pixar's Cars.
It is.
Jason Porath also has this hit. The website rejectedprincesses.com is. I was like, Jason, if he cared to, I feel like he put a lot of years into this, but if he wanted to expand it, he could just do a podcast and he would have thousands and thousands of entries just based on the contents of his website. And then there's this whole community of people who write in who are like, what about this woman? What about this woman? What about this woman? What about this woman? So it's like, it is a treasure trove. So on
love it.
It's amazing. On his site, he has this whole section called Modern Worthies. Modern worthies.
Okay. I like where this is headed.
I do too. He writes, in the 14th century, several authors began to latch on to the concept of the 9 worthies, a collection of men who exemplified virtue, kind of like the 7 wonders of the world, except for people. We're talking folk like King Arthur, Julius Caesar, and Charlemagne. A few years after that, authors started identifying a female pantheon of worthies as well. And much like the actual 7 wonders, nobody ever agreed who exactly was and was not on the list. First of all, I love the spark of the 7 worthies.
7 worthies.
It's a great name for something.
Yep.
Band name. Pick it. It's the 7 worthies. He goes on to say, sometimes I run across people whom I don't feel are good fits for full entries. Sometimes it's because their stories are so short or because they didn't have the right amount of struggle in their lives to make for a really interesting story. Most of the time, it's because they died within recent memory. As a rule, I don't do entries on people who have been alive in the past 50 years out of respect. But there's so many, but I've seen him break that rule, I will say. But there are so many awesome and interesting women. What to do? Enter Modern Worthies, a showcase for just such women. One of the reasons he shares these links to information about these women is with the aim of building a map/database of modern day interesting women as a resource to everyone. It really is like this open source treasure trove of sparks, and it's really diverse too, which I appreciate. He covers subjects in all of his work, he covers subjects from throughout history, from all over the globe, trans women, gay women, women from myths and legends. It's really, really, I fell into this rabbit hole, and I was like, I will come back here for more sparks.
Oh, hell yes.
It was so hard to pick who to talk about, like who to highlight, because
so many women.
It gives you spark blindness. It's crazy. It's really, really good.
Also just gives you a sense of, I mean, for me, like, it's so exciting and also bittersweet because it's just a reminder of the truly millions of women that we've not learned about, that their stories haven't been told, because it is all about, like, who tells your story.
My hope is, and maybe this is Pollyanna, we were talking about on a recent episode how you brought up that idea of you die 2 deaths. One is when you die, and the second is the last time somebody says your name, which I think is a very Coco sort of idea. Did I say that?
I actually don't remember that. I don't know where I got that, but someone deserves to be credited. Okay.
To that idea, he is keeping these stories alive, these names alive, that I think there's possibility in people accessing 100%. These stories, and not just through Jason's work, but other people's good work, so that maybe these stories do get cracked open and do get told.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that they could have been lost forever until someone picked up a torch and said, we're going to keep lighting this torch and keep telling this story to make sure it stays alive.
Maybe lost to us, maybe, but clearly the resources in many cases are out there. It just takes somebody who has this sort of like dog with a bone mentality to, he will find everything he can on a subject that he's interested in. He will read everything he can. And in that, I feel like he sort of takes one for the team. In that sense. Yeah.
I'm truly in awe.
Yeah. In the Artgasm podcast with Allison Moon asked Jason Porath what kept him going during the development and making of this project, which not only has taken a great deal of time and capacity, but like any other project that has any visibility, he's been trolled, he's been criticized greatly for all the aforementioned reasons. Yeah. But he said basically his why, his purpose goes back to his mom. He describes his mom as this badass woman who, for her first 3 birthdays with Jason's stepdad, got a chainsaw, a flamethrower, and a power scythe. She raised 8 boys. 8 boys.
Oh my gosh.
8 boys.
Wow.
She reshingled her roof without any help from her adult sons. This is just to describe the kind of person she is. He describes his mom with great admiration, how he will never be as smart as his mom, She also grew up in Kentucky in the 50s where smart women weren't prized. She was a cheerleader. She dated a dude from the football team. In her 30s, she divorced her first husband, found Mensa, and really started flourishing. Really, like, all of this intelligence and all of these interests and passions rose to the surface. And then she had to make a choice about if she would pursue all of these passions and intellectual pursuits or be a mom. And she chose to be a mom. And Jason Porath felt like he wanted to pay his mom back somehow. He says he knows he can't go back in time and help his mom in Kentucky when she was 13, 14, 15. But he feels like his work could help someone who is in his mom's position at that age, someone who feels like an aberration, that there was something wrong with them, that there's never been anyone in history like them. And that's what kept him going. Because, I mean, the amount of work that this person has generated is kind of remarkable. He's really gets some shit done. So what has been made of this? If you're Jason Porath, you make a fantastic website, 2 great books. Rejected Princesses is the first one, and his second book is called Tough Mothers. And just the cover of this book is sort of, if I can describe it, it's sort of a crest of, it looks like sort of a royal crest, right? And in the crest is a bear standing up on its back 2 legs.
Yeah.
And there's a little baby.
Is that the mama bear?
That's the mama bear. And there's like a little baby bear cub kind of like holding on to its like butt fur. So great books. But in addition to fun, rich, diverse content, Jason has organized his stuff really well. On his website, the search functionality lets you filter by things like types of subject. So you can look for martial, intellectual, professional, rascal, regal, strange.
Wow.
Also sorted by rating, G, PG, PG-13, R.
Wow.
Personality types, heroic, villainous, mixed. Story types, upbeat, mixed, downer, offbeat. You can search by the person's name.
Incredible.
You can search by when they lived. It is incredibly.
And this is free for everyone.
Just open source.
Wow. Wow.
His books are also organized really, really smartly. In spite of the cartoony illustration style, the books pull no punches and it's not censored. So Jason has these helpful guide markers at the top of each story. He ranks each story's maturity level from 1 to 5. And he also indicates if the story contains violence, abuse, sex, rape, or self-harm. So if you start at the front of the book, it's so smart the way he does it. If you start at the front of the book, you have stories that are good for kids. And by the time you reach the end of the book, you have some real life torture porn content. Like oh my God, I was reading it to Nathan in the waiting area while we were having our car serviced very quietly, very, very quietly. It was near the back of the book. And he was like, babe, you have to stop because if people hear you, they're going to be traumatized. It gets intense because the lives of these subjects were, it's at some points, very,
what they went through.
I was like, should I give an example of that? And I was like, no, it is insane in the membrane what some of these women have either been through, have had inflicted upon them, or what they have inflicted upon others. It gets very adult. Even I was like, I would dip my eyes down into a story and be like, nope, can't do it.
I like his warning system though.
I love it.
It's great.
And how if you're having a kinder, gentler sort of day, you could,
that's not for me today.
You could just keep it near the front of the book. It's really good. All of this is to say that Jason Porath has beautifully organized this labor of love, which the type A organizer in me finds deeply, deeply sparkish. But what do we make of this? Take your motherfucking pick.
Seriously.
If you dream of writing the next big kick-ass thing, if you're looking for a kick-ass subject who is a woman or a girl, and you want to find some great early sparks of inspiration, start by taking a spin through the works of Jason Porath.
Yes.
teachers, heads
Oh,
up. I
my
also
God.
think if curated properly, this could make for great curriculum to get people of all ages into history and myth and legend
Yeah.
from around the world. You will want to curate it though, because as I said,
Sure.
it gets super duper adult.
Yeah.
But that is my spark, and I'm sticking to it.
Yes. I'm so sparked by it. I actually am like, can we cancel everything? I just want to go spend some time on that website. Honestly.
Clear your calendar, because it is. It's just like gem after gem after spark
Yeah.
after gem after spark after gem.
Man, I could see, I was just visualizing an exhibit of paintings that is all women done in the style of all of the, 200-year-old paintings that we see of men in their, on the battlefield.
Yes.
But it's women.
Yeah.
Because they deserve to be on those walls.
Portraits.
Mix it right in with all of those same men whose stories we learn about. All worthy stories, but let's get some ladies up there too.
I can also imagine a photograph series that sort of recreates and represents some of these lives.
Mm-hmm.
And also very sparked by what he does, where he brings in all of those, like in classic portraiture, you bringing those details and those signs and symbols that represent different parts of their lives, would be super cool. Here's to you, Jason Porath.
Thank you, Jason.
Rejectedprincesses.com. Check it out. And both those books are really, really fun
I'm
too.
going to that website right now.
Bye.
Suze, that spark was so flipping good.
Oh, Camion.
I mean, I want to share my spark with you, but I am also really torn because I would like to go spend some time on that website.
I feel like this is a spark where I can take no credit. This is all, it's all him. It's.
But you shared it with us.
I know,
and
but
that's what matters. I like it. I like Jason. I like his work.
I like it too. What have you got for me today, Ding Dong?
Today I wanted to talk about, you kind of know, Suze, like I've spent a lot of my life around the Astor Place area of New York City.
You sure
the
have.
Astor Place Theater, where Blue Man Group played for several decades, is still playing. And I was there for several decades and spent most of my time there. So for those of you who don't live in New York City, Astor Place is a location downtown. It's really just 1 block long.
Oh,
that's right. That's right. Oh, it's just 1 block, but people refer to the connecting streets in this area as Astor Place. It connects the major streets of Broadway and Lafayette right around 8th Street. It's considered the East Village, or NoHo, which is north of Houston, part of town. But it is home, as I said, to the Astor Place Theater. And across the street from the Blue Man Group Theater is the Public Theater, where so many incredible performances have been made, many of which go on to play Broadway or tour around the country. So a lot of great work and great things happen in this area.
it really is an epicenter.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And suffice to say, I love this part of town. Like, it holds a great deal of personal history for me.
Yeah.
But my spark for this week, I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into the history of this neighborhood, and specifically the deadly Astor Place riots that took place in May of 1849.
Huh?
They were started. Have you heard of them?
No.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you all about them. But there were deadly riots that took place in the Astor Place area, and they were started, by all things, over a competition between 2 actors. That's right. That's right. It's the craziest story. But to really understand what happened, let me give you some context. If you recall, our newfound little baby nation fought a war against the British in order to gain our independence. That war was over around 1783. and we were done fighting at that point.
This is good. This is the way I need to learn history.
Okay. Slow. Is it better when I talk really slow?
Well, just like
slow it down.
Let's put it this way, as if I'm hearing it for the first time.
I find like I love digging into historical sparks, but then I have to literally sit and do the math for a minute of like how that relates. So what time period? So that other person I learned about, were they alive when this person was doing this? I mean, we just don't learn about it, or at least I did not learn about it
contemporaneously. So it's sort of like this was happening
all
here.
These separate little events, and in my mind, dots had not been connected.
And also, I feel like sometimes we get confused because if you're looking to things like the Flintstones for history, like somebody like me is, then you're led to believe that human beings were walking around and riding on dinosaurs.
If you got your history from the Flintstones, we've got bigger
I'm not saying
problems.
I did or didn't.
That would be confusing. Okay, so here we are. So 1783, as our little nation, we have quote unquote gained our independence, and we were done fighting at that point. But the tensions are still there. And as we are trying to sort ourselves out as a new country, a few years go by and the British and the French got into a war. And if you recall, France helped us win our war against the British.
Yes.
So we were doing trade deals with them. The Brits got mad. We got mad that they tried to stop us from trading with the French. Long story short, we entered into another war called the War of 1812. Have you heard of that one?
I have heard of it.
So I had heard of it too, but I didn't really think about the fact that the War of 1812 was like 30 years after we gained our independence. And it's really kind of just a continuation of like, we're not done fighting yet. We're not really truly like, we haven't really asserted ourselves as a country. British, you can't tell us what to do. Fuck off.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we fight them again. And we come out pretty battered, but we win. And so now finally, here we are, 1812. And it's like, okay, for reals this time. We are our own country.
Yes.
And we think it's going to stick. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
We're our own nation.
Yeah.
Bada bing. So here we are, 1812. This period of time between the War of 1812 and our Civil War is about a 50-year period. It's usually referred to as the antebellum period. Have you heard that term?
I've heard that term.
So that's what that's referring to. It's prior to our Civil War, when we figure out, like, we fight about slavery, among other things. But between this 50 years, 1812, this war, and the Civil War, 1860s, was really a time when the U.S. started to exert kind of who we are. It's sort of like, imagine I don't even know if we'd say teenage years, probably adolescent years, when your personality is starting to form, right? And we're trying
on clove cigarettes.
We're trying it all on. That's right.
Am I a goth?
We're breaking some rules, just testing the boundaries. What are we doing here? So all of that is happening, and a lot of tensions, are escalating. Obviously, we end up at war with ourselves in the 1860s. But here we are. That's just to give you some context. Here we are in the 1840s. Tensions are building, right? We're 20 years, we're leading up to the Civil War.
I have to tell you, I'm just like hanging. I'm hanging on your every word, because sometimes this stuff is so hard for me to take in and to learn that I'm just like, that's why I probably look like an idiot right now, because I'm just like,
don't. Are you tracking though? Does this make sense?
I'm tracking.
Like, we fought a war.
Yeah.
To gain our independence. We fought another war to make sure
we're locking it down.
Independence.
Yes.
That's right.
That was so
1812.
The War of 1812. Then there was a 50-year antebellum period between the War of 1812 and the Civil War in the 1860s.
It's basically, we fought with the British. We fought the British again.
Yeah.
And then later we fought with ourselves.
I'm with you.
Right? Okay. So here we are. It's the 1840s.
God, people listening to this must think I'm a fucking idiot.
No, I think probably people are like, awesome. I needed to learn that too. I honestly, like I said, every time I dig into one of these, I have to be like, okay, wait, why is this happening? And how does that relate to this other thing?
Puzzle pieces click into place.
That's right.
Yes. Okay.
That's right.
Okay.
All right. So we're in the 1840s. We're figuring out who we are. Tensions are building everywhere, but particularly in New York City. The upper class is really pulling ahead and away. The gap is widening, a gap we see even more amplified today.
Like the financial,
That's right.
Okay.
That's why I love these stories that illustrate things are still happening today. And we look back, we're like, well, this is fucking more than 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So a poet at that time, Nathaniel Parker Willis, coined the term the upper 10,000 or the upper tens, which would be like the 1% as we call them today, but they would call them the upper tens. And it was like the upper 10,000 people who really were, it was the Vanderbilts, it was the Rockefellers, like they had invested their money in a certain way and were like, whoo, now they're making bank nobody's business. The wealthy just got wealthier, but they also, at the same time, it was confusing because they also kind of represented the opportunity that America offered. So someone like John Jacob Astor, he was a German immigrant. He worked in a butcher shop. He eventually made a fortune in the fur business. And then he sold that business and he got into New York City real estate. He was the richest man in America. Oh. He was the Warren Buffett. He was the Mark Zuckerberg. He was the,
Jeff
Bezos. Yeah. He was the first multi-millionaire in our country. And he got there through hard work. So people were not dissimilar to today. People were disgusted by if you have money, how much money you can make. And also inspired by, well, hey, if he can he can get off a boat from another country and make himself the first multimillionaire of the country, then there's hope for me.
Yeah.
So we still have this really frustrating relationship to wealth. But it goes all the way back to the origins of our country. A fun fact for you, Susan.
Yes.
John Jacob Astor. So there's a piece of artwork in the subway station at Astor Place. And I know you love subway station art. It's like a tiled image of a beaver. And it seems kind of random. Like, what's this beaver doing in the Astor Place subway?
Yeah.
And it's a reference to the fur trade of how John Jacob Astor made his money.
His fortune in the fur business.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, is it on the uptown track or the downtown track?
I think it's on the downtown.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look for that beaver.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So look at that.
Thanks.
So as I said, the gap was growing, but on the bright side, in this particular moment, industrialization, so a lot of these wealthy guys, job creators, were making jobs that allowed a working class to develop for the first time. So these are hardworking people who are now making a livable wage, maybe even with a few dollars to spare. Not wealthy at all, but had a little tiny bit of expendable income.
Yeah.
So that's where we are. But then here come the immigrants. Does this sound familiar?
It does.
It's so crazy to me. I'm like, are we still fighting over the same shit?
Yes.
So here come the immigrants. And the working class that I just described was very worried that these immigrants were going to take their jobs.
Okay.
Or they would keep the wages from being livable.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, unlike today, they probably had a bit more reason to worry because labor laws had not been developed yet. So if you could find someone to work for less or someone who is willing to work an 18-hour day, that person might actually be a threat to your job.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing keeping from employers from doing that.
Wow.
And literally there's stories of people getting right off the ship from wherever they're coming from and being bombarded immediately with like, join the army, come work for me, come do this, because they're so grateful to have a job, they would most likely agree to
Some pretty
substandard
poor conditions. Yeah.
So it actually was a threat, but now it's not legal. So we actually don't have quite as much to worry about on that front.
Right.
But in the 30-year period leading up to the riots, there was an explosion of immigration. In the 1820s, 128,000 immigrants came into the U.S. By 1840s, 1.4 million immigrants came to the U.S.
Wow.
Some of that was, hey, this country is a real thing. Like I said, like they won the War of 1812, and it's like, oh, this is legit. This is a real thing.
You start to hear stories coming back. When you get off the boat, there are people that are throwing jobs at you.
There's opportunity. Yeah. And you hear the stories of the John Jacob Astors and the people who are making a lot of money.
The old American dream.
Right?
Yeah.
But you also had a shit ton of people, sorry for not more specific numbers there, of Irish people who were fleeing the Great Famine, literally starving to death in Ireland. And if they could get on a boat and get here. And because of that influx, the population of New York City grew from 80,000 people to 700,000 people in a very short span of time.
Wow.
So as I said, tension just are really, really high. I can't imagine living in a place where the population, 7 times over in 20 years. You know what I mean? That's amazing. In your lifetime, and you're just seeing like things are changing constantly. So the working class is often epitomized by various gangs of New York. One gang in particular is called the Bowery Boys, which again is just a few blocks from the Astor Place. And the Astor Place is where all the wealthy people lived. The Astors, the Vanderbilts, the Delanos, they all lived here, and just a few blocks away, the working class, the Bowery Boys and gals. And they were rough and tumble. They were hardworking. They were proud. They had a certain slang to the way they spoke, and they were proud of that. They were anti-immigration, they were anti-Catholic, and they were all about America asserting our independence and freedom. They had an absolute disdain for the aristocracy.
It's so interesting because where did they come from? Who are they? If
they're that working class.
I know, but if they're anti-immigration, everybody, unless you're indigenous, is an immigrant. Unless they had a very short memory and they forgot that.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think they had a very short memory, and you had, so let's say 50 years of this country being a country. And it's a little bit of like, we got here first.
We got here first.
We did the hard work.
There's my answer. Yes.
We got here first. We fought the British.
Yeah.
We fought the British again.
Yeah.
And now you're coming over and you're going to take our jobs.
Got it.
But the ironic thing about them being anti-immigration, besides what you've already mentioned, is that the Irish, which as I said, was the majority of the immigrants coming in at this time, they had a common enemy in hating the British and hating the wealthy. So they actually could bond in a way, even though they were anti-immigration, their groups were aligned in this sense. Like, we can all agree, we hate the wealthy, we hate the British. Many of the Irish blamed the British government for the Great Famine. So they blamed the British for the fact that they even had to come over here, or that they lost family members.
Got it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, at this time in history, the mid-1800s, all classes of people went to the theater. It's kind of an amazing thing. Everyone enjoyed. It was truly
Everybody
for everyone.
wants to be entertained.
It was for everyone, but there wasn't yet like an American theater voice, if you will. Like, the traditions hadn't been formed yet. They were holdovers from the British theatrical traditions, but times were starting to change in this moment. So the Bowery Boys would bring rowdy crowds to the theater.
Oh, man.
And if they liked a song or a dance, like, they might demand that you do it again.
Wow.
Loved it. I want to see that again. If they didn't like you, you were going to hear about that loudly, or you're going to have things thrown at you.
Oh, my God.
They drank, they smoked, they cavorted with prostitutes at the theater. It was fun for the whole family. It was everybody's in on this good time. So during this time, the first real American stage star made a name for himself. His name was Edwin Forrest. He played the Bowery Theater, the Broadway Theater, and he played an American version of Shakespeare. Powerful, body, energized. And he even toured the country, like gaining fame. He toured England doing Shakespeare, which is fucking ballsy.
Yeah.
He and his style were met with general acclaim over there, like maybe not robust enthusiasm, but the Brits didn't hate him, which was pretty impressive. They were okay with him. But at the time, the most preeminent British Shakespearean actor was a man named William Charles Macready. He was popular in England as well as the U.S. He had toured the U.S. several times, but he performed in the more traditional, subdued, genteel, refined style of performance at the time. And he was part of this high culture approach to theater. So you see, even with our theatrical performances, Americans were really beginning to define themselves.
Yeah.
Like, this is who we are. Forrest was wildly masculine. He was incredibly popular with the working class. They could see themselves in him. Representation matters, people. Representation matters. They were like all they needed to see was themselves up on stage.
Yeah.
And the beauty of Shakespeare, sidebar, I mean, it can be the same words, but performed differently and speak to different people. So for several years, Edwin Forrest and William Charles Macready were fighting for the title of the best Shakespearean actor. And for the most part, it was friendly and it was good-spirited. But then things took a negative turn.
Uh-oh.
And really, I don't know if this was personal or if the media realized they could sell more papers and the theaters could sell more tickets, if they like really pumped up the rivalry.
Sure.
So there was a report in one of the papers in the British press that Forrest had hissed at Macready during a performance. And that was all they needed to like really turn on him.
Yeah.
So then William Charles Macready comes to the U.S. for a tour. And Edwin Forrest, and I don't know, maybe his publicist, not sure whose idea this was, but Edwin decides he's going to travel to the same cities and perform Shakespeare at a competing theater on the very same nights as William.
No.
So they're going to just like travel our tiny newborn country and perform theater.
Wow.
Yeah. And
that's a spark.
That's a spark, right?
If you're like a rapper and you have beef with another rapper,
right?
To shadow their tour and just like be at a
East Coast, West Coast
venue in the same town, like basically
I wonder if that
splitting
ever
ticket sales and taunting them. You know, it would be amazing if it was strategic and it was all planned from the inside. It could be an amazing piece of marketing.
Well, credit goes to Edwin Forrest for doing this for what, as far as we know, was the first time.
Wow.
And he kind of set up this idea of an American versus an immigrant as a choice for viewers. So like what you're saying, East Coast versus West Coast, like who are you going to buy a ticket to go see?
A British immigrant.
That's right. American versus a quote unquote immigrant, but in this case being British.
Oh my gosh.
So Forrest supporters would go to Macready's performances and hiss at him wherever he went. But shows went on and audiences still appreciated. And again, generally good spirited through the country. But meanwhile, back in New York, tensions were running high and just increasing. And I should say at this time that riots at theater were quite common. It was kind of part of the show. Like they might be protesting actors that were cast or a song sung in the show. The theater owners might be using it a little bit to publicize the show, but it could be anything. But people would literally there's going to be a riot at the theater, quote unquote riot, meaning protest, basically. They show up for the 10 minutes before the show, scream, rabble, and then they leave.
Like the Hamburglar.
Yeah.
Rubble.
Yeah. So, but that was kind of a normal thing. They were planned. People showed up, they participated, then they went for a drink. Just kind of a thing to do. But when Macready returned to New York for the final performances of his tour, he was scheduled to play Macbeth at the Astor Opera House. Now, nothing could have been a bigger FU to the crowds in New York than playing at the Astor Place Opera House. Remember how I said that John Jacob Astor was the richest man in America?
Yes.
Well, the Astor Opera House was literally built to keep the riffraff out.
Oh, boy.
It was built to be like, in response to like all of this rowdiness at the theaters, we're going to build a legit high culture theater where the wealthy can go. They required a tuxedo, white vest, kid gloves, gowns for women. The prices were sky high.
So you keep people out with the prices, you keep people out with the dress code.
That's right. That's right.
And do we know where this is located?
We do. I'm going to tell you.
I'm so excited.
So the entire theater was designed for the comfort of the upper class. Instead of benches, which was the norm for theaters at the time, they introduced the upholstered seats. The seats were available only by subscription.
This is like when the movie theaters put in the recliners and you could choose your seat and have a meal brought to you. And
can you imagine? So there hasn't been a theatrical revolution since the
sippy
benches turned to. So 100 years later, we have sippy cups and
rattle that ice.
Yeah. All right. So this was big at the time, though, and it was a huge message to the quote unquote normal people who all of whom went to the theater. And suddenly there's this grand, glorious building they're not invited
Keep
to.
out.
That's right. So you could get the fancy seats only by subscription. There were 2 tiers of boxes, as you see like in opera houses. And then for the others who might want to see the show, they allowed for 500 general admission patrons to sit on benches way up high, reachable only by a narrow stairway and isolated from the fancy people below.
Gotcha.
So this area was commonly called the cock loft, which I think is a fucking fabulous
Smell
word.
you later, cock
The
loft.
cock loft. See you in the cock loft.
That's a good name for a bar.
Right?
Gay bar.
Cock
The cock loft.
Hello.
Good spark.
So those people still had to pay higher prices and arrive clean shaven, etc. But you could get in. That was one way that you could get into the opera house if you wanted.
Wow.
So suffice to say, this was not an experience most of New York could partake in, and it symbolized the very tension of the day. So on May 7th, 1849, when the British actor William Charles Macready played Macbeth at the Astor Place Opera House, Forrest fans were ready to show him what's what. The Bowery Boys and others had arranged to protest outside the theater, but they also bought tickets to the show.
Cock loft.
In the cock loft. So Forrest supporters bought hundreds of tickets and they attacked Macready with a wave of hissing and yelling, and all the other actors too. Like the night of the show, they threw rotten eggs, onions, all of it. They were so loud, the actors couldn't hear each other speak. So at first they tried to yell over it.
Yes.
They couldn't. So then they continued for a while in pantomime, just doing literally the motions of the show.
Wow.
But then some of the Forrest supporters up in the loft threw furniture down onto the stage, and that was it. That's when they stopped the show. They closed the curtain. They were like, "We're good. We're gonna. That's it. Now you've spoiled it for everyone."
This is. I'm just sitting here thinking, 500 people in the cock loft. That's a lot of seats. 500 seats.
That's
is a
right.
lot, which means this theater is huge.
It's huge.
Okay.
So that could have been it. That could have been okay. Head back to Britain.
Pack up the trunks.
Bummer. That didn't go well. But a group of New York City elite, including Washington Irving, Herman Melville, they were embarrassed by the behavior of the ruffians in the crowd. So they signed a petition and they implored Macready to stay and do another performance, just complete his engagement. That you basically we don't want you to go like this.
Yeah.
This feels yucky.
Okay.
Let's make this better. So he went on to agree to a final performance on May 10th. Part of the note that assured him to stay, they wrote that they believed the good sense and respect for order prevailing in this community will sustain you on the subsequent nights of your performance. So they just trusted, like, the ruffians have done their thing. They got it out of their system. We're going to show you we can be a civilized community. Good sense will prevail. And so the show goes on.
This is a good story.
Edwin Forrest is also performing Macbeth just a few blocks away at a competing theater.
Amazing.
So whether it was the ruffians or the politicians, we don't really know, but placards started appearing all around the city, just inflaming the issue. And it was like in huge writing, shall Americans or English rule this city? So really pitting.
So they were making it really, really political.
That's right. The big topic of the day is like, again, are the British going to come and tell us how it has to be done?
Yeah.
So again, they're really challenging our idea of our independence, essentially. And people rallied, like, we're not going to be beaten by this stodgy old English actor of all people. Like, it's crazy. So the sentiment was palpable and it was overflowing. And the Astor Opera House braced for another protest. But as people, on the night of May 10th, as people gathered outside the theater, the crowd grew to like 10,000 people in total.
God, Astor Place isn't even that big.
Well, there were less buildings, so not all those buildings were there. But yeah, the police warned the mayor that they did not have the staff to deal with this. So the militia is called in.
Wow.
That's right. Inside the theater, the show starts promptly at 7:30, but the audience is really nervous. They can hear the crowds outside. It's so loud. And a small number of anti-McCready audience members had made it past the police checkpoint and into the show.
Sure.
So they make a run for the stage, trying to seize McCready when he's on stage. Who knows? But the undercover cops inside the building grab them, the group of Forrest supporters, and they put them into a makeshift cell inside the opera house. I don't know what that could be. Just a locked room, I suppose.
Maybe janitor's closet. Ye olde janitor's closet.
Right? So McCready, sorry, I was just picturing that. Yeah, they're in the janitor's closet. So McCready flees out the back door. Like, he's scared at this point. Like, again, you hear the crowds outside. You know what happened the last time. Someone's just run at you on the stage.
Yeah. So
he flees out the back door in disguise, and he gets himself safely back to his hotel room. Needless to say, the show is not going to go on. The quote-unquote prisoners in the opera house gather some wood shavings, held them up to a gas light, and set their own cell on fire.
Oh no, burn the janitor's closet down.
The crowd outside is throwing bricks and stones through the windows of the opera house. Meanwhile, the militia has been told by the mayor that they cannot fire on the crowd. But it's truly getting out of control. And the city was constructing a sewer line at that time in the neighborhood. So there were piles of like paving stones on the street that they were going to be using.
AKA ammo.
So the crowd start throwing them at police and really injuring them.
Wow.
Like, you get hit in the head with that or hit in the leg. So apparently, when the commanding officer tried to warn the crowd that they would have to fire back if they kept this up, people kept yelling things like, burn the damn den of aristocracy, or fire if you dare, take the life of a freeborn American for a bloody British actor. Like, really putting it against, like, you're going to choose this British actor over us.
This is not good.
This is crazy. So eventually the militia told the mayor, we're going to leave if you don't let us fire on people. Like, if you don't give us permission to fire, we're not just going to stand here
and get hit by cobblestones.
Right? So they got permission and they fired into the crowd. The first shots they shot over the heads of the crowds. Obviously, they didn't want to hurt anyone.
Right. Just trying to snap them out of it.
But the crowd was unintimidated and they kept at it. So the general ordered the men to fire again, point blank. Supposedly, he said to aim low so he wouldn't kill people, but you'd have people like shot in the knees or in the legs. So they did that. And it took 2 more rounds to get people to disperse, like to really take seriously.
Jesus.
By the time it was all over, 22 people were dead.
Oh.
And nearly 100 officers were injured,
Oh my
like badly
God.
injured. And at that point, it was the deadliest riot in New York City history. The next day, the city became a temporary police state. 2,000 infantry patrolled the streets until everybody settled the
Calm
fuck
the
down.
fuck down, everybody.
Eventually, the militia were acquitted of any wrongdoing, and 10 riot planners were sent to jail. As a result, law enforcement changes were made, police were more armed, like procedures were changed. And this truly ended the tradition of riots at theaters. Like this was it. Obviously, people didn't even plan small little protests anymore.
Amazing.
The Astor Place Opera House, however, never recovered. It was now referred to as the Massacre Opera House or the Disaster Place Opera House. The venue was sold super cheap. It became the New York Mercantile Library for a time, also known as the Center for Fiction, which still exists today, but it's now over in Brooklyn. But eventually, they tore the building down and they built a building they called Clinton Hall, which is still there today, although today it is a Starbucks. The Starbucks.
The
Starbucks. Yeah, right there. And that road, not 8th Street, but right there, that is Astor Place.
Okay, so where the Starbucks is, was that like where the entrance to the Astor Place Opera?
I think along there, maybe where Au Bon Pain is now.
Got it.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like I think the building spanned that whole
block.
That
little block. And it's not a rectilinear square kind of block. It's got some angles to the dangle. Oh my God.
Yeah. So that was a huge change. It never recovered. And entertainment truly made a split at that time, like a real divide in popular culture. So vaudeville became the entertainment outlet for the common folk, the working class, like freedom of expression and participation. And sadly, Shakespeare, which had been so popular in every single class, young kids could recite Shakespeare on cue. It faded from popular culture and was relegated just to the upper class. The educated, the elite would continue to enjoy Shakespeare. McCready never returned to the U.S. He retired from the theater not long after. And I have to wonder if this event, if it took its toll on him in ways like deeper than we'll ever know. He lived another 20 years, but didn't perform.
I can imagine if you're an actor who has had somebody try to leap out of the audience and get you, just that, like it's so traumatic.
I can't even imagine to feel like your life is in danger on stage.
Intense.
So what do we make of it? I mean, personally, like I mentioned, I love a historical story that actually is a story about modern issues.
Yeah.
You know, like when you can hold a mirror up to where we are now by telling a story in the past. I love it. I think we're still in a class war. I think we're still living in fear of immigrants taking our wages. And it would be an amazing way to illustrate some of the tensions we're feeling now.
Agreed.
I think. I think you could do something crazy and write a comedy about a war between two actors that's really about something bigger than themselves, you know, minus the deaths, et cetera. But like, can you imagine what two like actors like battling anything out in this day? And what would that be for? I just think it's an interesting question.
I also think like the next thing I want to make out of it most immediately is I want to make a little walk. I feel like sometimes as we move through the world, it is so easy just to be like, we walk the same roads. We see, yes, there's the Sweet Greens, there's the Starbucks, there's the Au Bon Pain. But to even the thing you said about like the beaver in the subway station and and what it means, the deeper story there. I think the next thing I want to make is an eye-opening walk.
Yes.
wherever I am, but
Yeah.
specifically, I'm very interested in taking a spin around that area and also having some research about what it used to look like so I can contextualize the story.
100%. Like literally my next bullet point is honor the neighborhood. Like
Yes.
I won't walk these streets the same knowing what I know now and how many people died and what for. Many of the people who were killed, I'd love to know more about too. Many of them were innocent bystanders.
I bet.
Right?
Just looky-loos.
Yeah. And I think like there's stories in their stories. And I also think we're due a story or two on Edwin Forrest, frankly, like a deeper dive into him. I went a little deeper, just scratched the surface, but wow. After all of this, he had a crazy dramatic divorce from his wife, where, as best I can tell, he cheated on her, but then tried to get out of the marriage by claiming that she cheated on him, which at that time...
He's complicated.
Yeah. I mean, like we can think of it in modern times, but at that time, that would mean absolute ruin for the woman. So that means getting out of your marriage, but fucking that other person so badly they couldn't have a life beyond it. Do you know what I mean?
Monkeys. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's more. So they battled it out and eventually the court sided with her. And I think, not great. I think he avoided paying her any alimony. But on the bright side, again, these complicated people, he did do great things for other actors. A few years after this, about 10, 15 years later, you may recall that an actor named John Wilkes Booth shot President Lincoln. So this time frame, actors were held in very low regard in our world. And so he created a home that would shelter retired actors, those who had given their life to performance, but then were really treated badly by society. After he died, he instructed that his home should be called the Forrest Home for Retired Actors in Philadelphia. It remained there for 100 years until it was folded into the much larger Actors Fund.
Oh, we love the Actors Fund.
We love the Actors Fund.
Actors Fund is a spark.
Right? To honor the work that he did helping other actors, there were 2 new theaters built, one in New York and one in Philadelphia. Both were initially named the Forrest Theater in honor of him and his contributions. The one in Philly is still named after him, and the one in New York changed names a few times, but is now known as the Eugene O'Neill Theater.
Shut up.
That's right. And then I want to know what happened to McCready. I want to know. Someone please write a story. Figure out after he retired. What does that do
this
to
is some
this?
Good,
Right?
The sparks are here for some good historical fiction.
Yes, I think there's so many good stories to tell, and there's so many ways to tell them. Personally, I'm really grateful for this spark because I found out a lot of history that has literally been under my nose and under my feet for a long time.
This is giving me a spark. Another thing that I want to make from this spark that is sparking a spark for me is I really do feel like, okay, wherever you are listening to this right now, wherever you are, if you're in a fixed position, even if you're traveling on a train or whatever, wherever you are, if you look in a 1 block or even like a 1 mile radius from where you are, there are sparks buried
galore.
On sparks. And then on top of that is another strata of sparks.
Who has walked these streets?
Yeah.
What have they been doing when they did?
I'm sparked by this spark.
Yay!
Oh,
I say our next thing is let's go take a walk together.
We're going to take a walk together, and I learned history, which is not always easy for me to learn.
You got this, Suze.
But it helped me. Some puzzle pieces clicked into place for me. Thanks, Cams.
Yay!
That was so good.
Yours was so good.
Sparks
I'm
and
fond
sparks
of this
and
episode.
sparks and sparks.
Woo!
I guess that's it. We hope that this put another bunch of sparks in your file. Listen, if there's a spark that you'd like us to explore, or if you've taken a spark and fanned it into a creative flame and you'd like to share that, email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We will even take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you need to share a creative risk that you've taken recently.
Also, don't forget to follow us on social at The Spark File, and be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe, rate, 5-star review it. If you like this podcast, won't you share it with people that you love? And if you didn't like it, Farewell, mon ami. Adieu. Adieu. Adieu.
If something tickles your fancy and gets your creative juices flowing, my God, we are writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that's been knocking at your door. It's your turn to take a spark and fan it into a flame.
You got to light and dark it. You got to creativity spark it. You got to Patti LuPone and the baker's wife and full on meadow lark it.
You gotta take it and make it.
Pew, bye. Pew, pew, pew. Spark.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I wanna make or how I wanna be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.